right. Aloha mai kākou. I'm Brianna Govea, the Collections and Program Specialist at the King Kamehameha V Judiciary History Center. On behalf of the center, mahalo for joining us today. While the remarks tonight don't necessarily represent the opinions of the judiciary, I'd like to thank Chief Justice Mark Rechtenwald, the Hawaii State Judiciary and Legislature for their continued support of our mission. It's my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished guests, Haku Mele Cody Pueo Pata, Jonah Kahanuola Solatorio, Nicholas Kelly Lum, and Zachary Lum, and Maui attorney Dr. Lance Collins. Pueo, a Hawaiian language and culture educator, is kumu hula of Halau Hula o Kamalama Mahilani, o Kamalama Mahilani, with Haumana on Maui, Oahu, and Japan. Kahanuola, Nick, and Zach are bandmates in the award-winning group Mele Hou. Kahanuola is also a kumo'olelo Hawaii at Kamehameha Schools, Kapalama High School. Nick is a doctoral student at UH Hilo's College of Hawaiian Language, and Zach is a doctoral student in political science at UH Manoa. Lance is an attorney in private practice on Maui, specializing in areas such as Hawaiian land rights and land use law. We'll have time for audience Q&A at the end of our program. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screens to submit questions at any point. And a friendly reminder that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Judiciary History Center's YouTube channel. Our first mele, Honokaʻi, was composed by Nick, dedicated to preserving, protecting, and restoring the natural and cultural environment of West Maui. The West Maui Preservation Association's advocacy at Honokaʻi is memorialized in this mele. Tireless efforts to protect this abundant āina teeming with sea life would eventually make it to the U.S. Supreme Court. Beautiful. Nick, so I have our first questions for you. What does Honokawai and its protection mean to you?
I think for me, there's two big things to answer for that. One of it is just the preservation itself of our natural resources, and the other side of it is well, let's just talk about that first. So the biggest reason for writing Honokawai was to bring awareness to the injection wells that were pumping pollution into the water and the fishery of Ha'ena Nui seaward of Honokawai. And because of that, what was once a reef teeming with life, it became a really desolate place with barely any sea life. Lance and I actually got a chance to visit the area and actually swim into the ocean and see the devastation on the reef, and it's definitely not a healthy looking reef ecosystem now, and I'm sure it was a beautiful one before. So one of the main things that this song does is it brings awareness to all of us that we must take care of our natural resources, and and another thing is also to allow our native people the right to have access to our areas to be able to feed our families, to fish in our areas, to hunt, to gather, and to practice our cultural activities. Those are the two main ideas that this song brings forth.
Thank you. And of course, moana and water in general is of great importance, not only in Hawaiian culture, but as a symbol in Mele. Can you share your mana'o about the symbolism of the ocean in this particular song and Hawaiian music more generally, and what it means to Kanaka Maoli?
I think specifically in this song, it's just not necessarily using the ocean as a metaphor for something bigger, but it's just to bring awareness, like I said before, for that specific place of Ha'ena Nui and how we need to take care of our resources, regardless if it's a fishery, if it's some other vahipana that we may have, or any place being desecrated, we can even say that. It's just to bring awareness of things like that, right? Rather than looking for some bigger metaphor about what kai means to us.
Thank you. And Lance, could you maybe speak a little bit about just more detail about the issues in final judgment in this Supreme Court case?
Yeah, so the Earth Justice filed the lawsuit on behalf of several community groups, including the West Maui Preservation Association, and they won at the district court, and then they won at the Ninth Circuit, and then it went up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they won again. And then it went back to the district court, and then there were cross motions for summary judgment, and again we won. And actually, the county last week indicated that they were not going to appeal, and so the time to appeal has expired. So there is a final judgment now, a final judgment, and the county will get an NPDES permit to regulate any pollution that does end up going into the ocean. And based on our 2015 settlement agreement, they're also going to commit to reusing the water, which of course is very, very necessary in West Maui, because there's a lot of diversion of water to use for all sorts of other purposes. And so being able to use basically reuse the effluent that is treated can help reduce the need to have to divert water from native and other in-stream uses.
Wow. Well, congratulations. How exciting. That's really amazing. And thank you, Nick, for capturing this in that beautiful mele, and Lance for the work that you're doing to get this, justice. Thank you so much. So we're going to move to the next mele. Composed by Pueo Pata, Lapaku I Kamoku Wahine o Pele honors Kānaka who fought to protect lands at Wahikuli from being sold and removed from the Crownlands Trust. It also reminds listeners about the very creator of Wahikuli, Pele. The many features of āina created by this akua wahine are now used by kama'aina of the area for farming and fishing.
ke kai naku naku I ka Kānaka o Ko lapu I ka Kānaka hine Na paku I ka moku ka hine o pele Ela ela ea A aka ke kai naku naku I ka Kānaka o Ko lapu I ka Kānaka hine Na paku I ka moku ka hine o pele Ela ela ea Miki ke kai ko vale ka paua paua I mino I ka elia ka wahine Na paku I ka moku ka wahine o pere Ea la ea I miki ke kai ko vale ka paua paua I mino I ka elia ka wahine Na paku I ka moku ka wahine o pere Ea la ea Wahikuli Haku I ka āina ka wahine Na paku I ka moku ka wahine o pere Ea la ea Hore I ka hua ka rere anu wahikuli Haku I ka āina ka wahine Na paku I ka moku ka wahine o pere Ea la ea Nā kolo kolo ana pu ka maka o ka uira Nuku I ka noa ka wahine Na paku I ka moku ka wahine o pere Ea la ea Nā kolo kolo ana pu ka maka o ka uira Nuku I ka noa ka wahine Na paku I ka moku ka wahine o pere
Beautiful. I love the change in beats in this mele. It really captures, I think, her spirit and energy. Pueo, can you speak about mele in general as a tool to honor akua and natural processes, generally, and then more specifically your relationship to mele as an expressive form?
Sure. So mele are forms of mo'olelo, which are mo'olelo is something that's kind of said orally and then passed on serially either across a generation or through generations. And so because mele encode data and they are passed serially along, they're forms of mo'olelo. Through mo'olelo, of course, we have mnemonic devices and different poetic devices that we use to ensure that these data get passed on from generation to generation. But we also want to make sure that those generations know how to access that knowledge. When it comes to akua, like Pelema, there are certain formats that we follow, certain types of words that are common throughout many mo'olelo and mele of Pele that we try to ensure make their ways into the types of compositions that we do contemporarily for Pele herself as well. So this song does encapsulate some of those words, but it also has other mana'o that tied specifically to this area. My own relationship to mele is I'm a hula practitioner. There is no hula without the mele, but I'm also a trained Haku mele through the Kaupu lineage. And so the techniques that I use to compose are also the techniques that I use to kind of pick apart or access the data in the compositions of other people as well.
Thank you. Can you share a little bit more about your process when writing a mele like this, or composing a mele inoa? What do you have a process that you follow, or is it different and organic every time?
No, there's a definite āina that we follow. The types of prayers that we do, even the moon phases I compose on, I follow those types of things. Excuse me. So for this particular mele, what my kumu told me was aohe ponoiki, aohe wahi aho e ponoiki ko ho'opau wale i aku. There's no virtue in wasting even a single breath. And so when we compose, we make sure that each line is as condensed as possible with knowledge, with as many layers of meaning as possible, so that with the expenditure of just one breath, we can convey 3 to 4 different messages along with that. And so the outer meanings of the song, that you see the outer translation, the surface translation of this, but in the song are also, I've encoded knowledge about Pele's activities here. The stories that we have on Maui are different than the generalized Big Island-based stories of Pele. And so one of my aunties was Diane Napua Amadeo, whose family comes from Kauaula Valley here, and she has very specific Pele knowledge for this area, Wahikuli. I'm in Wahikuli right now, actually. And so I was sure to encode not only Pele-based words, excuse me, my allergies, Pele-based words, but also to encode site-specific knowledge that the kupuna here passed from generation to generation, and also to ensure that the younger generations will have access to these places and these place names to know why they need to respect it. So when it comes to composing, there's a lot we have to consider, actually, and the way that we do it, I do have a set āina that's proprietary, and it will cost you money to find out.
Thank you, Pueo. Lance, speaking about Pele's natural powers and gifts, what are your thoughts on current law designating new land that's created by volcanic activity as public trust land?
Well, I think it's only right that be the case. I think anything new that's created, everything that existed came into the control of individuals at the grant of the king as the representative of Akua. And so if new land is created, why wouldn't it basically be held in a public trust situation? Why would a private individual that happens to be the neighbor, for example, be the owner of it? So I do think within the logic of Hawaiian tradition and custom, as it's been expressed in property law, I do think that that's the right result.
Thank you. And do you want to comment just in particular on the significance of Wahikuli in the Crownlands Trust case?
Oh, sure. So maybe people are wondering, like, so what does Crownlands have to do with Wahikuli? So this case was another Hawaii case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. I believe the case is OHA versus HCDCH. The Hawaii Supreme Court ruled that lands from the Crown Land Trust could not be alienated without a cloud on title, and that cloud on title being the unresolved claims of the Hawaiian people. One of the bases for that was the apology resolution, and it was that particular legal issue that the legal administration appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court said that the apology resolution does not create a cloud of title on the alienation of Crown lands, but the case ended up settling and the appeal was dismissed, and so all of the other bases upon which Crown lands may have a cloud on title were not resolved by the Hawaii Supreme Court. And so the case that stands, the OHA versus HCDCH, still stands. That part hasn't been overruled for all of the other reasons why the Crown Lands Trust cannot be alienated free and clear of any clouds on title. So that's the significance. And it was Wahikuli, this ahupua'a in West Maui, that was the subject of the dispute that went to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Wow, thank you, Lance, and mahalo, Pueo. We'll move to our next mele. Nani Wale Paunau commemorates the work of various community groups who have fought to protect their communities. Michelle Lincoln and her neighbors along Kohomo Channel and the tenants at Front Street Apartments. Nani Wale Paunau is also dedicated to Samuel Kalani'ako, a kama'aina and celebrated musician of the area. So beautiful and powerful that it commemorates the local community's efforts to protect themselves. Can you speak about, Lance, the specific housing or development struggles that this mele commemorates?
Sure. I just want to make sure it's very clear, if someone didn't catch it, that Iliahi Paredes is the Haku Mele for this song, not Lance Collins. He's a deputy prosecutor with the County of Maui, but was not able to be here. He's also Kumuhula and a number of other things too, including the Haku Mele of this mele, not me. Okay. That being said, so this song was to commemorate two different groups that happen to be neighbors. One was the so-called Protect and Preserve Kahoma Ahupua'a Association, who sought to intervene in the development of a piece of land between Kahoma Stream and Kainui Street, between the highway and Front Street, that many believed was part of David Malo's Alamihi fish pond. So that was one group. And then the other group across the street of Kainui Street is Front Street Apartments, which is an affordable housing project where the developer and the state about 5 years ago decided together that even though the developer had committed to 50 years of affordability in the rental project, the state and the developer agreed that they would terminate that 35 years early. And so the residents banded together. They lobbied everybody they possibly could on the political side. And when nothing was able to really get going and the affordability was going to end and rates were going to go up to market rate, a group of tenants sued. And it ended up going into federal court. And Judge Otake ruled last August that the affordability requirement had to be maintained for all 50 years. So it's presently on appeal, although the parties in the Ninth Circuit, but the parties are sort of have been in discussions of resolving it so that it doesn't have to go to decision. Oh, and I should say about the other group, the Ahupua'a Association. That went to, so they sought to intervene in the Planning Commission, Maui Planning Commission, which had a long-standing policy at the time of denying all interventions into all special management area permit applications. They appealed to the circuit court. The denial was affirmed, and then they appealed it to the ICA, and the ICA reversed. They voided the permit and reversed it and sent it back for a contested case. And then the developer sought the Supreme Court to review the ICA's decision, and the Supreme Court actually even went a little bit further than the ICA and clarified several issues related to community planning in general, and actually is a wonderful decision for community planning statewide. So yeah, so anyway, so this song basically commemorates those two different community efforts, and it of course is dedicated to Samako, who's a well-loved Kama'aina and musician and musical mentor to many in West Maui.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lance. Can you speak a little bit more specifically about housing struggles, development struggles West Maui is facing? Are there things unique to West Maui, or is it the same general struggles that we're seeing across all the islands?
Well, I think it's part of the same general thing that everybody's experiencing, but of course, every place has its own unique aspects. So for example, there are a lot of kids who, basically live in poverty, but the Lahaina Library could never get a grant for computers because the zip code that Lahaina is in has too high of a median income. So it's that kind of a situation that if you live in the zip code of a resort town, you are faced with those kinds of disparities in income. And then the result is that basically you have high levels of childhood poverty and insecure housing on the one hand, and then you have lots of luxury estates on agricultural lands and in gated communities right next door. So that is something that I don't know that every community in Hawaii experiences, but what West Maui is a microcosm of that tension.
That's really, really interesting to bring up. And I'm sure something not a lot of people think about, what zip code you live in affecting resources that public programs can get access to. It's very, very interesting. Thank you for bringing that up. One final question I'd like to ask about this is, how do you see community engagement like this, people taking action into their own hands? How important is it to justice and the legal system?
Well, I think everybody hopes that the political process is basically the first stop to try to resolve disputes. But what occasionally happens, and what happened both in the Front Street Apartments case and also the Protect and Preserve Kahoma case, the problems that occurred there was that basically the political process made decisions that weren't legal. And so by doing that, it basically broke the rules of the agreement, the social contract that the community has with government. And so I think that that's probably something that is very telling, that both the tenants in Front Street Apartments and also the Kahoma folks, that they persevered. The Kahoma thing went on for 7 years and it's still going on. And the Front Street Apartment things has basically been going on for 7 years too, and it's still going on. And people basically are persevering. And that really is what sustains that kind of social change.
Thank you so much, Lance. Our next mele, Aloha Ku'uaina o Kaua'ula, was composed by Zach. Tracing the mo'uku auhau of a pa'a to his original Land Commission Award, the Ohana Kapu succeeded in a case that sought to deprive them of their Kuleana land. Augmenting the Haku mele practice of ku'ina, this mele strings together genealogical inoa to commemorate the Ohana's victory, solidifying their claim at Kaua'ula. Beautiful. I love that this is both a tribute to a special place and a celebration of in Ohana's success. Zach, is the phrase in the last line of the last refrain, pono'i ua pa'a, is that celebratory of the court decision or the Ohana's stewardship of the land moving into the future?
Yeah, I think this entire mele is kind of it reminds me of what Noinoi Civil calls like a mo'oku auhau consciousness, where it's implicitly intergenerational, and that's really because the mele serves as a type of mnemonic device to remember the mo'oku auhau through which the Kapu family maintains its kuleana pono'i, not only its kuleana in the sense of responsibility, privilege, or right, but actually the land parcel, the LCA Kuleana lot there, through their ancestor Apa'a. And that's where that Apa'a, you can kind of see that happening in Kuleana Pona'i Ua Pa'a. You have that name reference there. But as far as the word Pona'i, I think most people will know that word from Hawaii Pona'i, right? And maybe less of us may kind of consider, okay, what are we really singing when we're saying Hawaii Pono'i? I think land tenureship or just land ownership in general, it's not this is something that our kupuna did, right? In some understanding of it, and you know that's what our ali'i pushed forth in many ways. So when we think about ownership, it's not just a capitalistic ownership, but I think it's also it's locating where I am in relation to, in proximity to this place that is very important to me. So when I think of the word pono'i, I don't necessarily think of I own this. This is my kuleana. I own this kuleana. I think more about like I am in relationship with this kuleana, and you know, going back to Hawaii pono'i, the idea that Hawaii pono'i, our own Hawaii, locates us in Hawaii, as opposed to locating Hawaii in our possession. So there's just a little, you know, worldview flip that has to happen there. But to answer your question, you know, Kuleana pono'i wa pa'a, yeah, I think it really commemorates both. The court's decision, yes, but really the court's decision already confirming what the couple family already knew. And that is the fact that this particular kuleana is theirs, is pono'i to them. And it is something that is pa'a, in a way where it's not being challenged anymore because of, you know, because of the court's decision.
Thank you, Zach. And can you speak to Mele's ability to speak to future generations?
Yeah, you know, it's cool that you asked that question, because it's like we rehearsed this. It's really cool because this mele, I kind of wrote it from the perspective of I was thinking about Keamoku couple's grandchildren and their children and their children, and in many ways, this is a mele. I envision that this is a mele that they could by which they could remember this mo'okuauhau, their literal connection to the land that, you know, in that specific area in Kauaula, which I had the opportunity to go with Keamoku couple there, and it was a wonderful experience, a beautiful experience, and in so many ways beyond what we can normally conceptualize as an everyday lifestyle. But it was something that was very eye-opening and beautiful at the end of the day. So I do, you know, I'm not sure if they're watching, but I do want to say mahalo again to them, the entire family. And you know, just to speak towards future generations, the song actually utilizes it kind of augments ku'ina. It doesn't use ku'ina. Ku'ina is like this the name that is used to describe when in English it's called linked assonance, but basically the end of the line is a word, and then the beginning of the next line is a word that's kind of connected to that, similar in sound or the same word perhaps. This uses that technique, but obviously you don't see it, right? Because it's not they don't look alike. But the end of the first verse, it has a name encoded apa'a, and then the beginning of the next verse has kekua, and then the end of that verse is haya, kekai, manuia, kulia for Julia, and kapu, and these are the names that this is the succession, the generations through which this kuleana is ultimately inherited by the kapu family and the generations of kapu family to come. So yeah.
Thank you for breaking that down, Zach. Lance, would you like to wrap us up with this mele and explain what the significance between Kuleana lands and Crown lands are?
Sure. I just want to note for people who are interested in reading the court opinion on this, because we haven't been citing it, it's Makila land versus heirs and assigns of a pa'a. It's an Intermediate Court of Appeals opinion, and it's actually pretty lengthy because it goes through the whole story. But yeah, okay, what is the difference or significance between Kuleana lands and Crown lands? So Crown lands, when Hawaiian land tenure was translated into this sort of hybrid form that Hawaii went into in the 1840s and 50s, Crown lands were set aside to support the head of state, which is the king, the monarch, and the Kuleana land was ways that small farmers could, ask for a title to particular ancestral parcels of land, or not ancestry. I mean, it could just be one generation, like Ho'opili gave it to a pa in this case in the 1830s. So yeah, so that's there are different aspects of translating Hawaiian traditional and customary land tenure into the hybrid form that appeared in the middle of the 19th century. And so they're just different aspects that had different social functions.
Thank you, Lance. All right, our final mele tonight is Kauai o Kauaula, composed by Kahanuola. It remembers the victory of the Kauaula Valley, oh my goodness, the Kauaula Valley Kalo farmers in an 1897 case, Horner v. Kumuli'ili'i. This mele also helps us to retain the various āina collectively stewarding and utilizing the waters of Pi'ilani Hawai and in Kauaula Valley. So kalo, of course, is central to Hawaiian life and culture, and the water that sustains kalo is of the utmost importance. So Kahanuola, what lessons in land stewardship and water management do you think kalo farmers offer, and how do they embody aloha āina?
Yeah, I always think about the olelo no ea huli kalima ilalo, ola oi. There's a couple of variations on that olelo no ea, but yeah, which literally means turn your hands down towards the land and you live. That's through putting your hands in the dirt, in the lo'i, planting kalo to feed your family. Yeah. These, just starting from the beginning, Haloa, we're descendants from Haloa. All of us are descendants from Haloa. So just having that relationship and that reciprocal relationship with him, the land will take care of us and we'll in turn take care of the land. That's always something that farmers, mahi'ai, probably think about first, that older brother relationship, that kuleana relationship. So yeah, and then just their work and everything that they do to provide for their ohana, to provide for their families, to provide for the community and the lahui. That's just the most aloha āina thing that you could do. Take care of one another by taking care of the land. So yeah.
Thank you. And here we see photos of you in the kapu ohana. Can you tell us about what it was like working with them and creating this mele?
Yeah, so it was very fun getting to meet them, getting to meet Keo Moku and his mo'opuna. So these are all his mo'opuna. And when we first got approached with this project, Lance asked to create a mele kamali'i, a song for the keiki. So going back to record it, I think it was just fitting for them to be a part of it. And you know, they're not professional musicians whatsoever, but they had fun with the process. They got to fly to Oahu for the first time, I think, for some of them. And yeah, it was just really cool because Keomoku did all of this work, and he does all of the things that he does for his mo'opuna and for the next generations to come. So yeah, it was just very fitting for them to be a part of this project with us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And yeah, it's really powerful how your mele harkens back not only to the work of ancestors, but it also kind of summons, you know, the keiki, the future generations. So as Haku Mele, how do you view your kuleana to not only your ancestors as it came before you, but to the future generations?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two things we could do is continue the songs and continue singing and learning the songs of our kupuna, because there's so many different things that our kupuna wrote about. If you look in the New Pepa, you see all of this repository, waihona of mele that you can look for. And they wrote about everything and anything. So, you know, we can learn those first of all, make that as our kahua, and then we can also haku our own songs. We can create new songs using their mele as an example, build off of those mele to, you know, continue what we have now, continue the place names, teaching about the place names that may have been forgotten, right, mele about new things that are going on in this time right now, so that we can tell our story for the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Kahanuola. Lance, do you want to add anything about the 1897 case, Horner v. Kumuli'ili'i?
I guess maybe I'll just add that, yeah, this case Horner was, of course, one of the West Maui sugar principals, and he basically sued all of the kuleana owners to allow him to continue diverting water for the plantation in Lahaina. And the Supreme Court actually ruled against him, and all of the place names that were sung in Kahanuola's song are all of the different divisions that were entitled to a half days of surplus water every 11 days. And so, yeah, actually Queen Liliuokalani was actually one of the parties in this case as well, because she was a owner of some of the kuleana. So it's a very interesting case that isn't really talked about, but it's an interesting case.
Thank you, Lance. Well, I'd like us to move to the audience Q&A for our final 10 minutes. Let's see. Okay, so just to start, just with a general question more about your backgrounds, where did your passions to compose and perform music come from? And anyone can take this. I know, Pueo, you spoke a bit about your mele and your history with that.
I'll defer to my elders.
Lance, you can start. I'll start. I'm not the elder though. For Zach and myself, we kind of grew up in a very musical family, so not necessarily Hawaiian music was the type of music we always heard in the household, but it was definitely a big part. And as we grew up, we went to the Kamehameha schools, and that kind of fostered our love for Hawaiian music. we got into many relationships with a lot of Hawaiian musicians during that time as well, who helped to foster that love again. And then we continued on to UH Manoa, got some Hawaiian language degrees and music degrees, and continued on with the Keoho process. And here we are now.
Are there?
I would echo what Nick says. I think he was speaking on behalf of me too, so that's perfect.
Are there any other creative forms that any of you dabble in to preserve or express history or current events? No.
Yeah, hula. Hula is a nexus for all different types of Hānānoapi and different types of or traditional craftsmanship or craftsworks, as well as oihana or different professions, all tie into hula. And so previously, in my generation, I'm a generation above them perhaps, we were trained to be jacks of all trade. And so we have to become masters of certain things, or at least highly proficient in lots of different aspects of that. So Mele, of course, is integral to hula, but the ways in which we encode data and the opportunities that we have through the Hānānoapi that for which hula serves as a nexus, there's so many that surround us.
Thank you. So this, a few of the major themes that I think the album really, really captures, it's Kuleana, aloha āina, land, natural resources, right? And obviously in the news, there's been some things that have come up here on Oahu at the naval base with some pollutants in the water sources, and just thinking about the value of water here. It's just the most important thing, and the album really captures and honors Vai. What do you think there is to learn from the history that this album commemorates, and what it's really calling us to pay attention to and better care for our resources?
I'd actually be really interested to see what Lance thinks about this, because there's, in many ways, this is his, I'm sure he doesn't want me to say this in this way, but this is his brainchild that, that's right, it came out of my mouth, brainchild, and in many ways, much of this wouldn't have been possible without him, so I would love to hear, just to impose on him ever so slightly.
Well, I think I'll make a joke. So, when you were talking to Nick about Ha'ena Nui, what came to my mind was, if Mad Max and Waterworld had a baby, it would be the reef of Ha'ena Nui. It's like, it's both totally inundated by water, but it's also like been decimated, but it's not completely dead. That's the thing, is that it's not to the point where it's going to be like millions of years before it can renew itself. It just needs to have the pollution stop so that it can renew itself. And when there were no tourists in West Maui for several months, there were signs of the regeneration of life. And I think that music is one of the ways that not just records history, but also points to something in the future that allows a community to have basically a framework to weave that future onto by using the framework of the past. And so I think that that's, in terms of environmental stewardship and, historical, remembering history and how to make it useful for the future, those are all aspects that in my mind as a non-professional musician and that I think is one of the ways, it's part of the cultural front. It's one of the ways that communities are able to thrive and transform and evolve.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on the power of song to motivate change or get people to really think about the past in a different way?
It also presents continuity. It continues, right? These traditions. We're so inextricable in this environment, and so are all of the loina and all of the cultural aspects that we still display and that we still practice. Mele is one of those things through which we can also demonstrate this continuity.
Mm-hmm.
And just adding to that, just, you know, with this project and some of the other projects we got to work on, we can definitely use Mele as an educational resource. You know, you can teach so many things through Mele, not just, you know, just for entertainment, but actually teaching someone about their place, teaching someone about the history. Yeah, and with the projects we have coming up in the future, hopefully we can do more things to educate our lahui, and not just our lahui, but also the malihini who come and use the resources that we have here. And yeah, I'll just stop there. Thank you.
No, and I think I would add to what both of them said too, is the idea that you know, when I think about music, really popular music, or you know, I was on my phone and I follow the Grammys on Instagram, so I was like looking at all these cool celebratory kind of things leading up to the Grammys, and I was thinking, like, you know, what's really interesting is that what our music practice here in or I guess the music community here in Hawaii, I would argue that it's aimed at something different than many of the other music communities around the world. I think that's simply because and Pueo would speak way better to this than I would, but the fact that Mele is not just a song, right? And I think it's not just for entertainment. It's literally one of the oral historical practices by which we know stuff today. Were it not for Mele, there'd be this entire section of history that we would not know. So when we sing Mele today, it's so hard, and I think it doesn't make sense to me to divorce that purpose, that original purpose from Mele, with what we actually do, right? When I say, okay, what's a Mele, it's not the words on the paper, it's experiential, right? It's all the things that it create a performative space through which people participate. So it's this living, dynamic thing that we experience here as Mele, and I think to utilize that as a means for pointing to a future or pointing to the past for the future, it means a lot more, and it means different things for this very specific cultural practice.
And adding on to what he said, and what Lance said also, is building on that old framework. Keauho and myself, we sing songs contemporarily that our great grandparents sang, right? Or if we have a chant that is now turned into contemporary music, it could be 1,200 years old. These lyrics are 1,200 years old, and we're still winning awards with them today. Our albums are. And so it's never really left us. And so hopefully we're providing continuity and providing songs that the next generations will also be able to know what we're going through today.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me pull the album up one more time as we are at time. All right, so it's been a pleasure, an absolute pleasure to talk with all of you tonight about not only your beautiful Mele, but the community and familial success that they record, and just the places and the people that they honor. So thank you so much for sharing this with our audience tonight. And the album Lei Nāhonoapiʻilani na Mele Hou is accessible on all streaming platforms. It would make perhaps a wonderful gift this holiday season. Everyone's going to receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a link, and we would greatly appreciate you to share your feedback about this program. And otherwise, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I hope you all have a safe night and a peaceful holiday season. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mahalo nui.
Mahalo.